A first-class lounge at LAX, buzzing with the quiet hum of privilege. A young black woman. Maya beams with pride, wearing a vibrant, custom-made dress. But her joy is shattered when a wealthy passenger, Carol Henderson, loudly mocks her, calling the dress trashy and inappropriate. Maya shrinks, humiliated by the racist remark. The passengers board the tension thick in the pressurized cabin. But Carol made one critical mistake. She has no idea who is flying the plane. Seconds after her cruelest jibe, the pilot's voice comes over the intercom, and his words will cause her entire world to crash down. The air in the Los Angeles International Airport first-class lounge was a carefully curated symphony of calm. Soft jazz trickled from hidden speakers, and the clinking of porcelain cups on saucers was the loudest sound. Maya Washington, 20 years old, felt like she was wearing a spotlight. She sat apart from the main clusters of business travelers, her posture perfect, her hands folded over the small portfolio on her lap. But it wasn't the portfolio that drew the eyes. It was her dress. It was a creation of her own design, a piece that had consumed her nights for 3 months. It was the dress that had earned her a full scholarship to the prestigious Parsons Paris design program. It was a riot of color, bold canary yellow and deep cobalt blue with a dynamic geometric pattern inspired by kente cloth, but modernized into a sleek, high-necked sheath. It was, in a word, joy, and it was the reason she was here. Her father, a pilot for the airline, had booked her this first-class ticket to Atlanta as a celebration. From there, they would fly to Paris together. She checked her phone, a bright text from Dad on the screen. Boarding soon. I'm doing my pre-flight checks. Can't wait to see you. I love you, superstar. A smile, genuine and bright, finally relaxed her face. She was so lost in the moment that she didn't notice the woman approaching until a shadow fell over her. I simply must know, said a voice dripping with a saccharine condescension that immediately set Maya's teeth on edge. Maya looked up at a woman in her mid-50s. She was impeccably dressed in a beige linen pantsuit that probably cost more than Maya's entire semester of textbooks. Her blonde hair was locked in a severe, expensive-looking bob, and her face was a mask of polite inquiry that didn't quite reach her cold, assessing eyes. This was Carol Henderson. I'm sorry, Maya replied, her voice small. Your outfit, Carol said, drawing the word out. She gestured vaguely with a hand adorned by a blindingly large diamond. Is it for some kind of performance, a theme party perhaps? The implication was immediate and sharp. Maya's smile faltered. It's my design. I made it. Carol Henderson let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was a sound of dismissal. Oh, you made it. How resourceful. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was paradoxically loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear clearly. A little tip, dear, from someone who knows. When you fly first, you dress the part. All that color, it's very loud. It screams, look at me, and it just looks, well, trashy. It's not appropriate for this cabin. The word trashy hung in the air, a poisoned dart. It wasn't just an insult to the dress. It was an insult to her. The subtext was suffocating. Someone like you in a dress like that doesn't belong here. Maya's face burned. She saw a businessman, Ben Carter, look up from his Wall Street Journal, wince, and then pointedly look back down. A young couple pretended to be absorbed in their phones. The silence of the lounge had become complicit. I like it, Maya stammered, her voice shaking with a sudden hot rush of anger and humiliation. Of course you do, Carol said, patting Maya's shoulder with a sharp talon-like fingernail. But it's just not our kind of thing. She turned and walked away back to her seat, where she picked up her phone and began typing the incident already forgotten. A piece of lint flicked from her perfect beige suit. Maya stared at her portfolio. The vibrant, joyful dress now felt like a costume of shame. She wanted to rip it off. She wanted to disappear. The gate agent's voice, muffled and distant, announced that Flight 221 to Atlanta was now pre-boarding. Maya stood up on wooden legs, the spotlight she had imagined now feeling like an interrogation lamp. She clutched her portfolio to her chest, the bright yellow of her dress seeming to mock her as she walked toward the gate, every eye in the lounge feeling like a new judgment. The jet bridge was a sterile tube, a gangplank into a fresh hell. Maya kept her head down the synthetic carpet, muffling her footsteps. She could feel the stares of the other passengers, the same ones from the lounge, as they filed in behind her. Carol Henderson was directly behind her, tapping impatiently on her phone, humming a little tune as if nothing had happened. The sheer effortless cruelty of it was what stunned Maya the most. As they stepped onto the aircraft, a flight attendant named Sarah, warm-eyed and professional, greeted them. "Welcome aboard." When she saw Maya, her eyes lit up genuinely. "Wow, what a beautiful dress. The color is incredible." Maya managed a weak, watery smile. "Thank you." Then Carol stepped past her, pushing slightly. "Excuse me, I'm 3A. She handed her ticket to Sarah without making eye contact, already scanning the cabin. "I hope the Wi-Fi is actually working on this flight. I have a very important board meeting to prepare for." Sarah's smile tightened but held. "It's fully operational today, ma'am. Enjoy your flight." Maya found her seat, 4D, an aisle seat. She slid in desperately, trying to make herself small to fold her bright, joyful dress into nothing. She buckled her seatbelt and stared at the seat back in front of her, praying for the door to close and the engines to start. Carol in 3A was just one row ahead and across the aisle. She was already making her presence known. She'd stopped Sarah, who was helping another passenger, with a sharp, "Miss, yes, Mrs. Henderson. This pillow is damp." Sarah, with practiced patience, took it. "My apologies. I'll get you a fresh one. And a pre-departure mimosa, not that sweet orange juice, fresh squeezed, and chill the champagne properly." "Right away." Carol settled into her seat, pulling out a thick binder labeled Henderson Charity Foundation, Board Materials. She was the picture of untouchable corporate power. From her perspective, her day was meticulously planned. This flight to Atlanta was a necessary inconvenience. The board meeting was a coup, plain and simple. She intended to oust the current foundation president, a well-meaning but soft woman, and install herself. It required precision connections and an absolute intolerance for anything unruly. In her mind, Maya's dress was just that, unruly. An assault on the established order of things. Carol Henderson believed in rules. She believed in standards, and her standards were inextricably linked with her wealth and her race. The girl in the loud dress was an anomaly, a disruption to the beige, quiet world she had curated. The public comment wasn't just casual cruelty. It was in her mind a correction, a way of reminding the girl of her place. Maya, meanwhile, was trapped in a spiral of self-doubt. The dress that had been her armor, her statement of identity, now felt like a liability. She thought of her father, Captain Marcus Washington. He was at this very moment in the cockpit, just a few dozen feet in front of her, preparing to fly this very plane. He was a man of immense dignity, one of the few black captains at the airline, a man who had overcome countless barriers with a quiet, unshakable professionalism. He had been the one to encourage her design. "It's you, Maya Bean," he'd said, his voice warm over FaceTime. "It's bright, it's smart, and it's brave. Just like you. You wear that dress, and you show them who you are." And at the first test, she had crumbled. She felt a tear slide hot and angry down her cheek. She wiped it away, furious with herself, furious with the woman in 3A. The businessman from the lounge, Ben Carter, filed past and took his seat 4B across the aisle. He glanced at Maya, his expression filled with a fleeting, unreadable emotion, pity perhaps, or guilt, before he opened his laptop, disappearing behind the screen. He was ashamed of himself. He knew what he had seen. He knew the racist undertones of our kind of thing. But Ben Carter was a man who avoided conflict. His entire career in aviation logistics was built on not making waves, so he'd said nothing. And now he was sitting directly across from the victim of the very encounter he'd failed to challenge. The tension in the cabin was palpable, a low-grade hum of unspoken animosity, all of it focused on the bright, colorful target of Maya's dress. The cabin door sealed with a pneumatic hiss. The safety video began to play. Maya closed her eyes, wishing she could teleport to Atlanta. The takeoff was smooth. The massive Airbus A321 climbed gracefully out of the coastal haze of Los Angeles, banking east over the sprawling city grid. As the "Fasten Seatbelt" sign pinged off the first-class cabin, sprang to life. Sarah, the flight attendant, began service, her smile never wavering, though she gave Maya an extra-long, reassuring look as she took her drink order. Carol Henderson in 3A was already proving to be a demanding passenger. She had complained that her mimosa was too pulpy. She'd sent back her headphones, claiming one ear was faint. She spoke to the flight attendants with a curt, demanding tone that made it clear she saw them as servants, not safety professionals. Maya tried to lose herself in her portfolio. She flipped through the sketches, the fabric swatches, the photos of her late-night work. This was her life. This was the culmination of her dreams. She remembered the moment she'd sewn the final stitch. She had FaceTimed her dad holding the dress up to the camera. "Marcus Washington," she'd teased, using his full name as she always did when she was proud. "Prepare to be amazed." His laughter had boomed through the phone. He was on a layover in London, the hotel room behind him dark. "Maya Bean, that's a work of art. It's sunshine. That's what it is. You're bringing sunshine to Paris." That memory, so pure and happy, warred with the current, stinging reality. She looked at the dress now. The yellow felt garish. The blue felt loud. Carol Henderson had planted a seed of doubt, and it was growing thorny and invasive. To make matters worse, Carol was now on a phone call using the in-flight Wi-Fi. Her voice was loud, cutting through the cabin's hum. "Richard, I'm telling you the board is solid," she snapped into her phone. "All I need is for you to put in the call to Mr. Carter at the aviation board. Yes, that Ben Carter. If his logistics company smooths over the contract for the Foundation's new international shipping, he'll back my play. No, I don't care what it takes. Just get it done." Across the aisle in 4B, Ben Carter flinched. He looked up from his laptop, his eyes wide. He was that Ben Carter. He was flying to Atlanta for that very meeting. He looked at Carol Henderson, who was completely oblivious then at Maya, who was staring at her lap, trying to pretend she couldn't hear. Ben suddenly felt a cold knot of dread in his stomach. This woman who was so casually racist in the lounge was now leveraging his name in a high-stakes power play. An hour passed. The flight attendants served lunch. Maya picked at her food, her stomach in knots. Carol had sent her salmon back, claiming it was overcooked. Then the plane hit a patch of rough air. It wasn't dangerous, just uncomfortable. A few sharp jolts followed by a sustained, bumpy vibration. The "Fasten Seatbelt" sign chimed on. Sarah's voice came over the cabin PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some light turbulence. We ask that you return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We'll be suspending cabin service for the moment." The plane shuddered again, a little more aggressively this time. A few passengers gasped. Carol Henderson, annoyed, slammed her laptop shut. "Oh, perfect," she muttered loud enough for Maya to hear. "Just what I need. This entire flight is a disaster. Probably can't even fly the plane properly." Maya felt a hot spark of defense. He's the best pilot they have. She wanted to scream it, but she just gripped her armrests, her knuckles turning white. The plane dipped, and a few overhead bins rattled. The cabin was tense. And then a new voice came over the PA. It wasn't Sarah. It was the voice from the cockpit. It was a voice that was calm, steady, and resonant. A voice Maya had known her entire life. "Good afternoon, folks. This is Captain Washington speaking." Maya's head snapped up. "We're just navigating a small weather system over the Rockies." The voice continued, smooth as polished glass. "Should be out of it in about 15 minutes. We're going to keep the seatbelt sign on for your safety, so please stay seated. I appreciate your patience." The voice was a balm. The cabin collectively relaxed. The turbulence already felt less severe, tamed by the sheer confidence in his tone. Carol, however, was unimpressed. "About time," she huffed to herself. The captain wasn't finished. "On a personal note," his voice continued, and the shift in tone was subtle but clear, a little warmer, a little less formal. "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a very special passenger on our flight today. My daughter Maya Washington is flying with us in the cabin." Maya's heart stopped. She felt every eye in first class turn to her. Across the aisle, Ben Carter's jaw went slack. In 3A, Carol Henderson, who had been reapplying lipstick, froze her hand halfway to her mouth. "She's on her way to celebrate a truly incredible achievement." Captain Washington's voice filled the cabin. "She just won a full scholarship to a design school in Paris. I am unbelievably proud of her." Maya was burning, but this time it wasn't from shame. It was a hot, bright glow. "She's actually wearing the dress she designed for her application," the captain continued. "A beautiful yellow and blue piece. She poured her heart into it, and it's a symbol of her hard work and her immense talent." The connection was now undeniable. Every passenger who had been in the lounge, every person who had heard Carol's venomous words, was now staring wide-eyed first at Maya and then at the back of Carol Henderson's perfectly coiffed blonde head. The captain's voice dropped, becoming firm with an edge of pure protective steel. "I've been made aware," he said, the calm deliberation in his words making them heavier than any shout, "that this same dress was the subject of some targeted, cruel, and deeply inappropriate remarks by another passenger in the gate area. I just want to say for the record that on this aircraft we treat everyone with respect. There is no place for bullying or bigotry. Not on my flight, not anywhere." The silence in the cabin was absolute. It was so quiet Maya could hear the whine of the auxiliary fan. Carol Henderson, XA, had stopped working. Her face, visible in the reflection of her dark monitor, had gone from pale to blotchy red to a ghostly white. She looked like she had been slapped. And then the captain's voice softened, the warmth returning, directed only at his daughter. "Maya Bean," he said, the old pet name echoing through the plane. "You wear that dress with pride. It's beautiful, and so are you. I love you, and I'll see you in Atlanta." The intercom clicked off. For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then the older woman in 5C who had been watching started to clap. Just a slow, steady clap. Ben Carter, snapping out of his shock, joined her. Then the young couple. Within seconds, the entire first-class cabin, with the glaring exception of 3A, was filled with a warm, rolling wave of applause. Maya, tears streaming down her face, wasn't hiding anymore. She was sitting up straight, her bright, beautiful brave dress on full display, a beacon in the stunned and silent aftermath of a perfect paternal defense. The applause died down, but the atmosphere in the cabin had been irrevocably altered. The power dynamic had shifted with the force of an earthquake. Carol Henderson, who had moved through the world with the untouchable arrogance of a queen, was now a pariah in a pressurized tube. She sat bolt upright, her face a mask of rigid fury. Her humiliation was so potent, it was almost a physical presence. She was trapped. She couldn't leave. She couldn't hide. Every whisper, every glance was a fresh indictment. She fumbled for the call button, jabbing it repeatedly with a trembling finger. Sarah, the flight attendant, arrived a moment later. Her professional smile was firmly in place, but her eyes were cold. "Yes, Mrs. Henderson. I want to file a formal complaint," Carol whispered, her voice hoarse and shaky. The contrast to her earlier booming arrogance was stark. "A complaint about what, ma'am?" Sarah asked, her tone perfectly level. "About him," Carol hissed, gesturing toward the cockpit. "The pilot. That was completely unprofessional. He used the company's equipment to attack me, to embarrass me." Sarah did not blink. "Ma'am, the captain is the final authority on this aircraft. He is responsible for the safety and welfare of all passengers. He addressed a situation that multiple witnesses reported as a targeted verbal assault." "It was no such thing," Carol retorted, her voice rising, regaining a fraction of its former indignation. "It was a private opinion. I am a million-mile flyer. My husband is Richard Henderson of Henderson & Cole. He sits on the board of... The captain's announcement was about supporting his daughter and reinforcing the airline's anti-harassment policy. "Mrs. Henderson." Sarah cut her off, her politeness now a weapon. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for bigotry." "Bigotry?" Carol gasped, looking around as if for support. "I said her dress was loud. It was a fashion opinion. You are twisting my words. This is slander." From across the aisle, Ben Carter, the quiet businessman, finally spoke. His voice was not loud, but it cut through Carol's rising hysteria. "You called her dress trashy," he said, not looking at Carol, but at Sarah. "You said it wasn't our kind of thing. I heard it. We all heard it." Carol's mouth opened and closed. She looked at Ben Carter, a dawning horror on her face. She was remembering the name on her phone call. Ben Carter. The aviation board. Ben Carter just looked at her, his expression one of profound disappointment. Carol turned back to Sarah, her desperation palpable. "I am being harassed. I want to speak to someone else. Get me the purser." "I am the lead purser on this flight, ma'am," Sarah replied, her voice flat. "There is no one else for you to speak to. Now, if you'll please lower your voice, you are disturbing the other passengers. Can I get you anything else?" "Water, coffee." The "or anything else" was delivered with such finality that it was a clear dismissal. Carol Henderson, for what may have been the first time in her adult life, had no leverage. She had no power. She was just a woman in seat 3A, surrounded by people who had just witnessed her public disgrace. She sank back into her seat, her face as white as the damp pillow she had complained about. The rest of the flight was a study in quiet vindication. The turbulence smoothed out. The seatbelt sign turned off, but the personal atmosphere remained. When Sarah resumed service, she leaned down to Maya, her voice warm and low. Your father is a very good man, honey. Don't you let anyone make you feel small. That dress is a masterpiece. Thank you. Maya whispered the words, catching in her throat. The older woman in 5C on her way to the restroom paused by Maya's seat. She reached out and patted Maya's arm. You keep designing, you hear me. You are going to be a star. And your father? Well, what a man. Even the businessman, Ben Carter, who had been so silent, caught her eye. He raised his coffee cup in a small, silent toast. It was a gesture of solidarity, an apology. For Carol Henderson, the remaining 2 hours of the flight were an agony. She didn't ring her call bell again. She didn't order another drink. She didn't open her laptop or her board materials binder. She just sat rigid, staring at the bulkhead as the judgment of the entire cabin bore down on her. Her mind was racing not with remorse, but with damage control. She was already crafting the narrative. The pilot was unhinged. The flight attendant was insubordinate. The girl in the dress had provoked her. She would call Richard. Richard would fix this. He would sue the airline. He would have the pilot fired. He would have Sarah fired. He would fix it. Her entire life was built on the foundation that Richard Henderson could fix anything. But as the plane began its long, slow descent into the humid air of Georgia, a new sickening thought crept into her mind. Ben Carter. The man across the aisle. The man whose name she had used on the phone. The man who had personally, publicly contradicted her. He had seen it all. He had heard it all. For the first time, a sliver of genuine fear, cold and sharp, pierced her arrogance. What if Richard couldn't fix this? The plane touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport with a gentle bump. As it taxied to the gate, the usual post-flight energy was absent. There was no shuffling, no premature unbuckling. The cabin was quiet, expectant. Everyone was waiting. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah's voice came over the PA. Welcome to Atlanta. We ask that you remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate. Carol Henderson was already on her feet, grabbing her expensive bag from the overhead bin. She was desperate to get off the plane, to escape the pressurized courtroom she had been trapped in. She shoved her way into the aisle, ignoring the "remain seated" instruction pushing past Maya's row. Maya, startled, recoiled. "Ma'am," Sarah said, stepping into the aisle, "please return to your seat." "I have a connection." Carol lied, her voice tight. "We are not at the gate. Please sit down." Sarah's voice was no longer polite. It was an order. Defeated, Carol slumped back into 3A, her face blotchy with rage. The plane finally docked, and the disarm doors chime sounded. The passengers in first class, in a rare, unspoken agreement, did not move. They waited. Maya, confused, stayed seated. Ben Carter waited. The older woman waited. They were all waiting for Maya to go first. "Maya, honey," Sarah said, walking up to her row. "Go on. Your dad's probably waiting." Maya unbuckled her hands, shaking. She gathered her portfolio and stepped into the aisle. She walked the few feet to the front of the aircraft. And there, standing in the galley right outside the open cockpit door, was Captain Marcus Washington. He was taller than Maya remembered his captain's uniform, immaculate, the 4 gold stripes on his epaulets, seeming to glow. He wasn't smiling. His face was a mask of professional gravity, but his eyes, when they met hers, were filled with a fierce, burning love. He didn't say a word. He just opened his arms. Maya dropped her bag and ran into them, burying her face in the crisp, clean scent of his uniform. She felt his arms wrap around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, his voice thick for her ears only. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I'm so sorry that happened." You heard," she muffled into his chest. "Sarah called the cockpit from the galley phone before we even took off. She reported the incident at the gate. I knew. I've been flying this plane with a fire in my chest for 4 hours." He kissed the top of her head. "Now go on. I'll meet you at baggage claim." He let her go, and Maya, her face wet with fresh tears. This time of relief, stepped onto the jet bridge. Then Captain Washington turned his attention back to the cabin. His eyes scanned the deplaning passengers. He nodded politely at Ben Carter. He smiled at the older woman, and then his eyes landed on Carol Henderson. She was frozen in the aisle, trapped. She couldn't go forward. The captain was blocking the exit. She couldn't go back. The other passengers were behind her. Marcus Washington looked at her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture. He just held her gaze with the quiet, unassailable authority of a man who was completely in charge. "Mrs. Henderson," he said. His voice was deep, steady, and chilled the air. I, she stammered. Her narrative of the unhinged pilot evaporated in the face of his powerful calm. "Your behavior today was unacceptable," he stated. "It was not an opinion. It was a fact. You verbally assaulted a passenger. You created a hostile and discriminatory environment. You did this at my gate, and you brought that poison onto my aircraft." "Now you listen to me," Carol sputtered, falling back on her only defense threats. "My husband is Richard Henderson. He is a very powerful lawyer. You have no right to speak to me this way. That was a private conversation. You abused your power. You'll be hearing from our legal team. You will be fired." The last word hung in the air. Fired. Captain Washington didn't even blink. "Ma'am, I am responsible for every soul on this flight. That includes my daughter. Your attempt to humiliate a young black woman for her inappropriate dress was a failure in basic human decency. Your threats mean nothing to me. You are a guest of this airline, and today you were a disgrace to it." He had not called her a racist. He had simply described her actions and her failure. It was devastatingly effective. Carol was bright red, shaking with a fury that had nowhere to go. Excuse me." A new voice joined the conversation. Ben Carter, the businessman, had stepped forward. He stood beside Captain Washington, looking at the apoplectic Carol. "Mrs. Henderson." Ben Carter said, his voice quiet but firm. "I believe you were trying to reach me earlier." Carol's blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about." "Ben Carter, Atlanta Aviation Board," he said, holding out his hand. Not to shake hers, but just to state his name. "You were on the phone with your husband, Richard. You were telling him to put in the call to me regarding the Henderson Charity Foundation and an international shipping contract." Carol Henderson stopped breathing. This was not happening. "I was flying to Atlanta for 2 meetings tonight, Mrs. Henderson." Ben continued, his voice as cold as the captain's. "The first was with your charity. The second was a dinner with the entire executive board of Henderson and Cole, including your husband, Richard." Carol's bag, the expensive one, slipped from her shoulder and hit the floor with a dull thud. "I am, of course, canceling my meeting with your foundation," Ben Carter said, "and I'm afraid my dinner with your husband's firm is going to have a new, very pressing topic of conversation. You see, the aviation board and my logistics company take issues of public conduct very seriously, especially when they involve federal aviation partners. And a registered incident of passenger bigotry on a flight, that's what's the word Richard would use? A liability." He looked from the ashen-faced Carol to the composed captain. "Captain Washington," Ben said now, holding his hand out to the pilot. "It was an honor to fly with you. Your daughter is an incredible talent, and you, sir, are a class act." Captain Washington shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. Safe travels." Ben Carter nodded, stepped past the paralyzed Carol Henderson, and walked off the plane. Carol stood alone in the galley. The other passengers filed past her pointedly, not looking at her. She was invisible. She was nothing. Her threats were empty. Her power was gone. Her husband, her foundation, her social standing. She had set fire to all of it right there in the LAX lounge. "Mrs. Henderson," Captain Washington said, his voice softer now, almost pitying. "You are holding up my passengers. Please exit the aircraft." Numb, defeated, and utterly broken, Carol Henderson picked up her bag and stumbled onto the jet bridge, walking into the ruins of the life her own hatred had destroyed. The repercussions of Flight 221 did not end at the gate. They rippled outward, swift and devastating, as karma began its meticulous work. That evening, at a private dining room in Atlanta, Ben Carter did indeed have dinner with the board of Henderson and Cole. The mood was supposed to be celebratory, a closing of the new logistics deal. Instead, after the appetizers, Ben put down his fork and cleared his throat. "Gentlemen," he began, "I have to be honest. An incident occurred today that has given me serious pause about our new partnership." He then recounted in spare, factual detail everything he had witnessed. He told them about the lounge. He quoted Carol's words, "trashy, inappropriate, not our kind of thing." And he described her entitlement on the plane, her demands of the staff, and her loud, indiscreet phone call about putting in the call to him. And then he told them about the captain, the daughter, and Carol's subsequent threat to have a decorated pilot fired. Richard Henderson, who had been laughing at a joke just moments before, went utterly pale. This was not a private matter. This was a public-witnessed, bigoted incident linked directly to his firm's business. The other partners were silent, their expressions ranging from appalled to furious. In the world of high-stakes corporate law and aviation logistics, liability was the ugliest word in the dictionary. Carol Henderson had just made her husband's name synonymous with it. The deal was not signed. Ben Carter left the dinner early, citing a need to reassess the character of potential partners. Richard Henderson's humiliation was total. He wasn't angry at his wife's racism. He was incandescent with rage at her stupidity, her public, arrogant, witnessed stupidity. When Carol finally met him at their Atlanta hotel, hysterical, trying to spin her victim narrative, he cut her off. "You're done," he told her, his voice flat. "The foundation, the board. You're done." The fallout was immediate. The next day, the Henderson Charity Foundation held its emergency meeting. Carol, who had planned her triumphant coup, was not even allowed in the room. Ben Carter had already spoken to the board president, the very woman Carol had tried to oust. The board voted unanimously not only to reject Carol's bid, but to remove her from her current seat, entirely citing conduct unbecoming. But karma was not finished. The airline, backed by Captain Washington's formal incident report, Sarah's detailed log, and a voluntary, glowing written testimony from Ben Carter, launched a review. The legal threat from Henderson and Cole never materialized. In fact, Richard Henderson sent a formal letter of apology to the airline's CEO personally, assuring them the matter was closed. The airline, however, did not close the matter. They found Carol Henderson in breach of the passenger conduct contract. She was fined for her disruptive behavior and in a final crushing blow was placed on the airline's internal "Do Not Fly" list for a period of 5 years. The woman who built her identity on being a million-mile flyer was grounded. Her social life in Atlanta and LA evaporated. The story in polite, hushed whispers made the rounds. She was the woman who insulted a pilot's daughter on his own plane. She was the woman who got her husband's multi-million-dollar deal killed. She was a liability. She was, in the language she understood, trashy. The flight from Los Angeles to Atlanta had been a 4-hour crucible. The flight from Atlanta to Paris was a 10-hour rebirth. That evening, before their connecting flight, Marcus Washington had taken his daughter to a quiet, upscale restaurant in the Atlanta Airport Hotel. The hum of the lobby was a world away from the pressurized silence of the first-class cabin they had just escaped. Maya sat still, wrapped in the airline blanket Sarah had given her, her portfolio on the empty chair beside her. She had changed in the airport bathroom, unable to bear the weight of the pilot's daughter dress a moment longer. It was now carefully folded inside her carry-on, a loaded weapon now returned to its holster. They sat in silence for a long time. The only sound, the clink of silverware on plates at other tables. Marcus reached across the white tablecloth and placed his large, steady hand over hers. "I am so sorry, Maya Bean," he said, his voice quiet, but vibrating with a residual anger that Maya had rarely heard. "I am so sorry that you had to endure that." Maya looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. She made me feel so small, Dad." Her voice broke. For a second when she said trashy, I hated the dress. I hated it. I hated myself for making it. I just wanted to be invisible. I wanted to be wearing beige just like her. Marcus's grip tightened on her hand. "No," he said, his voice firm as a command. "That's what people like her want. They are creatures of beige. They live in a world devoid of color, of joy, of courage. And when they see it in someone else, someone they've already decided is less than them, it doesn't just confuse them. It terrifies them. That woman wasn't critiquing your fashion, Maya. She was terrified of your power. She was terrified of your light." He let go of her hand and raised his water glass. "Your dress isn't loud," he said, quoting the word with a grimace. "It's eloquent. It speaks a language she's too ignorant and too cowardly to understand. Don't you ever let a person like that take up space in your head. Your head is for designs. It's for art. It's for your future." Maya finally let out a shaky breath. She picked up her own glass. "Eloquent," she repeated, tasting the word. "I like that." "To Paris," Marcus said, clinking his glass against hers. "And to the pilot's daughter dress. Let's call it what it is. It's earned its name." "To the pilot's daughter dress." Maya agreed, and for the first time since she'd walked into that LAX lounge, she managed a real watery smile. Paris was not an immediate dream. It was a crucible. The Parsons program was grueling, a relentless gauntlet of 20-hour workdays, ruthless critiques, and a level of competition Maya had never experienced. Her scholarship meant she was under constant review. She had to be better than everyone else, just to prove she belonged. Her small apartment in the 11th arrondissement was cold, the winter light, gray and thin. The pilot's daughter dress hung on a hook on her closet door, a silent sentinel. And as the weeks turned into months, Maya noticed something terrifying. Her work was becoming timid. She was designing safe pieces, tailored gray trousers, elegant but muted cream-colored blouses, a well-constructed but utterly forgettable black coat. Her formidable lead professor, Madame Dubois, a woman with a severe silver bob and a gaze that could peel paint, stopped at Maya's workstation during a midterm review. She examined Maya's collection, her lips pressed into a thin, disappointed line. "Mademoiselle Washington," she said, her voice cutting through the silent studio. "Your technique is as always flawless. Your seams are perfect. Your draping is competent." Maya's heart sank. In this world, competent was a fatal insult. Madame Dubois tapped a finger on a sketch for a simple navy blue shift dress. "But your soul is absent. The portfolio that earned you this scholarship, that had fire, it had a point of view. It was bold. It was, I believe the word is eloquent." She looked up, her sharp eyes pinning Maya to the spot. This is technically proficient, but it is polite. It is frightened. You are designing apologies. Why?" Maya had no answer, but she knew in a sickening rush of self-awareness that Madame Dubois was right. The ghost of Carol Henderson was standing right behind her, whispering trashy and inappropriate into her ear every time she reached for a bolt of bright fabric. She was subconsciously designing clothes that Carol Henderson would approve of. She was letting her win. That night, Maya stood in her cold apartment staring at the yellow and blue dress. She felt a hot, fresh surge of rage not at Carol, but at herself. She had let that woman in one 5-minute encounter poison her art. "No more," she whispered to the empty room. She tore the safe sketches from her board. She pulled out her portfolio, the one that had gotten her here. She spread the original sketches, the vibrant fabric swatches, the photos of her late-night work all across her floor. She remembered her father's words. "It's eloquent. It speaks." She sat on the floor, surrounded by her own fire, and she began to sketch. She didn't stop until the sun came up. The designs that emerged were not polite. They were not safe. They were pure, unadulterated, glorious Maya. While Maya was rediscovering her voice in Paris, the ripples from Flight 221 were still spreading back in the United States. Captain Marcus Washington was summoned to a formal internal review at the airline's headquarters in Atlanta. He walked into the sterile corporate boardroom, flanked by his union representative, to find 2 executives waiting for him, a stone-faced man named Harrison from legal and a sharp, pragmatic woman named Ms. Graves from corporate communications. "Captain," Harrison began, his voice flat, "we have a serious problem. You used the passenger address system company property for a personal matter. This is a severe breach of protocol. You publicly admonished a passenger, exposing this airline to significant legal liability. Mrs. Henderson has, through her husband's firm, informed us of her intent to sue." Marcus sat his back perfectly straight. He did not look at his union rep. He looked directly at Harrison. "Mr. Harrison," Marcus said, his voice the same calm, steady tone he used in turbulence, "I used the PA to address a passenger safety and welfare issue. Your characterization of it as a personal matter is, with respect, incorrect." "She insulted your daughter," Harrison countered. "She verbally assaulted a passenger in the gate area, an assault reported by my lead flight attendant, Sarah, before we took off." The crew noted Mrs. Henderson's continued disruptive and abusive behavior toward them on the flight. Her actions, rooted in clear bigotry, created a hostile and discriminatory environment for passengers and crew. My daughter was the target, but the entire cabin was the audience. I reinforced this company's stated zero-tolerance policy. I de-escalated a situation by asserting my authority as captain, and I defended one of my passengers. The fact that she is my daughter is frankly irrelevant to the protocol." Harrison looked taken aback, his legal pad argument momentarily derailed. Ms. Graves, the communications executive, spoke up. Captain, the intent to sue is one thing, but the story is another. She slid a file across the table. We've received feedback. A lot of feedback. Over 30 passengers from that flight have written in. She opened the file. I'll spare you the fan mail, but I want to read you one. It's from a Mr. Ben Carter, as in the Ben Carter of the Atlanta Aviation Board and Carter Logistics, one of our primary cargo partners. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. Graves read from the printed email, Captain Washington's conduct was a masterclass in command and decency. He handled a volatile situation created entirely by Mrs. Henderson's racist and abusive behavior with a professionalism and dignity that reflects the highest credit upon your airline. I have never felt safer on a flight. His actions were not just warranted, they were necessary. My company will be expanding our contract with your cargo division based on this display of corporate integrity. Harrison was silent. Graves continued. Furthermore, a story has just been published. Not in a gossip column, but in Vogue International's online journal. A fashion writer named Chloe Dubois was on that flight in premium economy. She heard the entire story from the crew. She was so intrigued she tracked your daughter down in Paris. She turned her laptop around. The headline read, The Eloquence of Color Maya Washington's Parisian Debut. The article was a serious, glowing review of Maya's design aesthetic, praising her bold fusion of Kenta cloth heritage and modern architectural tailoring. It framed the incident on the plane not as a drama, but as a clash between an archaic beige minimalism and the vibrant, courageous future of design. It celebrated Maya as a new, powerful voice. The article has been shared 70,000 times. In 2 days, Graves said. She closed the file. Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Henderson's intent to sue evaporated the moment her husband learned that Ben Carter was a witness. Her husband's firm Henderson & Cole issued a formal private apology to this office this morning, withdrawing their complaint. The Henderson Charity Foundation has voted to remove her from their board. And the airline has, as of 10 minutes ago, placed Mrs. Henderson on the 5-year Do Not Fly list for passenger misconduct. She looked at Marcus, her professional mask cracking into a small, genuine smile. The problem, Captain, is that your breach of protocol has resulted in a multi-million-dollar contract expansion and the best free press this airline has had in a decade. The board extends its gratitude. You are, of course, cleared of all wrongdoing. That will be all. The final pathetic karma for Carol Henderson landed not with a bang, but with a cold, empty silence. She was a ghost in her own beige mansion. The phone calls, the luncheon invitations, the charity galas, all of it stopped. She was a pariah, not because her social circle was morally outraged by her racism, but because she had in their eyes committed a far more unforgivable sin. She had become a liability. She had embarrassed her husband. She had lost a 9-figure deal. She was grounded. She was sitting in her sunroom scrolling on her iPad when she saw the Vogue article. She saw Maya's face smiling poised in a Parisian studio. She saw the picture of the dress, her dress analyzed and praised as a work of art. "Richard!" she shrieked. Her husband walked in, adjusting his tie. He was on his way to a dinner she was not invited to. He looked at her with a flat, dead-eyed coldness that had become their new normal. "What is it, Carol? It's her," she sputtered, jabbing a trembling finger at the iPad. "The girl from the plane. They're celebrating her for that awful dress." Richard didn't even look at the screen. And she was apoplectic. "It's not fair, I was right. It was inappropriate, and I'm the one being punished." Richard finally looked at her. his contempt a palpable thing. "Yes, Carol, you are. You picked a fight with a pilot on his own plane in front of a key business partner. Your fashion opinion has cost me personally a fortune in lost clients and has made my firm a laughingstock. You are a fool. And you are as of now a silent partner in this marriage. You will not represent the Henderson name in public again. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm late." He turned and walked out the click of the front door, sealing her in. Carol Henderson was left alone in her perfect, expensive beige room with nothing but the glowing screen of her own humiliation. Her world had shrunk to this single silent room, while the girl she tried to destroy was taking over Paris. 1 year later, a small packed-to-the-rafters gallery in the Le Marais district of Paris. It was the graduate showcase for the top students at Parsons and Maya's collection titled "Eloquent" was the finale. Backstage, Maya was a wreck of nerves adjusting a model's sleeve. Madame Dubois approached her, a rare, almost smile on her face. "Your work, mademoiselle," she said simply. "It has soul. Do not be nervous. Be proud." In the front row, Captain Marcus Washington sat, his suit sharp, his posture proud. He had flown himself to Paris for this. Beside him, to his surprise and delight, sat Ben Carter, who had rerouted a business trip from Dubai. "Wouldn't miss it, Captain," he'd said. "I feel like I'm a small part of this story." On Marcus's other side sat Sarah, the lead flight attendant, whom Marcus had flown out as his personal guest. The music swelled. The show began. The collection was a revelation. It was everything that was Maya. It was color. It was power. It was bold architectural coats in defiant fuchsia, sleek trousers in brilliant emerald, and power suits in a sharp, intelligent cobalt. The crowd, jaded and notoriously difficult to impress, was mesmerized. They were leaning forward. They were feeling it. Then the finale. The music softened, and a single dramatic spotlight hit the entrance of the runway. A model emerged. The crowd gasped. She was wearing the pilot's daughter dress. But it was reborn. It was the same bright, defiant canary yellow and the same deep cobalt blue. But the fabric was a heavy, luxurious silk that flowed like liquid, and the kente-inspired geometric patterns were no longer printed. They were in a feat of breathtaking craftsmanship, hand-woven with threads of glittering metallic gold. It was not a dress. It was armor. It was a trophy. It was a crown. In the front row, Marcus's breath caught in his chest. He recognized the colors, the statement. This wasn't just a design. This was the final word. This was her victory lap, stitched into fabric. He stood up. He didn't care about Parisian etiquette. He didn't care that the show wasn't over. He just stood, his eyes locked on that magnificent dress, and he began to clap. He clapped slow and loud and steady, the sound echoing in the suddenly hushed room. Ben Carter, a huge grin on his face, stood and joined him. Sarah, tears streaming down her face, was on her feet, whistling. And then, like a wave, the entire room, the jaded critics, the other students, the fashionistas rose to their feet, a deafening, rolling ovation. Maya stepped out from backstage, her hands over her mouth, tears glittering in her eyes. She looked out over the sea of standing, cheering people, and her gaze found her father. He had stopped clapping. He just looked at her, his own eyes shining with a pride so fierce it was almost painful. He didn't shout. He didn't wave. He just mouthed the words clear across the room. "That's my Maya Bean." Maya Washington. The girl who had been made to feel small. The girl who had been told she was trashy and inappropriate, stood in the brightest spotlight in Paris, wrapped in the applause of the world. She took a deep breath, and she bowed. And so Maya's dress, once a target of bitter racism, became a symbol of her unbreakable spirit. Carol Henderson, who tried to shrink others to make herself feel big, found herself grounded. Her world reduced to the beige, empty rooms of her own making. This is a story of hard karma, a powerful reminder that the cruelty you put out into the world will always, always find its way back to you, sometimes at 35,000 feet. It proves that the best defense against hatred isn't silence. It's a father's love and the courage to wear your colors proudly. Did this story touch your heart? Do you believe in karma? Let us know in the comments what you thought of the captain's incredible defense of his daughter. If you enjoyed this real-life drama, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories every week.